So this one is called array of multiples, and we want to create a function that takes two numbers, num and length, and we want to return an array of multiples of num until the array reaches, or until the array length reaches length. So essentially, if I could open IntelliJ here, what it's really asking is it's going to give you two numbers. One of those numbers will be the length of the array. In other words, it will be the length of how many multiples you want of the number which came before it. So the number here, we were provided with 7. And so we have to provide 5 multiples of 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so this is also how we get the length of our array. So first and foremost, let's actually go ahead and create a new array of length 5, or really, I mean, we want to think of this almost algebraically, because this won't work for all instances. If we're working with IntelliJ, we don't actually have a method for us, but I'm sure we could. But we'll actually need int length. So we're going to have something called the length. Well, first we're going to have, I think they call it num, right? So first we're going to have num, and so we're going to have num, and we're also going to have length. So for this one, the num is equal to 7, the number, and the length is equal to 5. So the length of this array, and it doesn't matter what length they give or what num they give, this array will always have a length of the second parameter here passed in. So what we'll do is we'll actually iterate through, and we want to populate this array with multiples of num. So whatever they gave as num, we want to populate the array with that multiple. Now, we want to go essentially, we want to iterate length times such that I is less than such that I is less than length. But nums dot length would also work because nums dot length is just length. So that's saying one and the same thing. Now, we could say, okay, we could say nums of I, right, is equal to, let's say 7. So nums of I is equal to the number, right, times times I. Now, and then of course, after that's done populating, we're just going to return nums. But what we want to ask ourselves is would this really work? So nums of I on the first iteration is 0, so it's going to populate the 0th. It's going to populate the element which is at the 0th index, which is actually just the first element, and it's going to populate that with num, so 7 times 0. We actually want to start having it. We actually want to start having it populating from 1, right? 7 times 1, and then 7 times 2, and then 7 times 3, and so on and so forth. So if I actually print this out here, you'll see that it's giving us multiples, but it's actually giving us multiples starting from 0, something we don't want to happen. So you'll see that it gets us from 0, 7, 14, 21, 28. So we want those multiples, but we want our multiple count to actually start from 0 and then move its way up from there, which is not what this is doing. So we have to somehow start getting, so I has to start from 1, and then it's going to have to keep moving up from there. It can't start from 0. Now you could change this to 1, but what you have to understand is that then if you run this here, this is the index. This is I here is referencing the index. So you're actually also populating the array starting from I is equal to 1. So you're actually populating the array starting from the second element, not the first element, which in that case would be I is equal to 0. So you get a 0 here. And again, that's something that we don't want to do. So it would be best to have the array itself start populating from 0. And this, we can call this, we can say int index is equal to 0. So this can be sort of an index, and we're actually going to start our index at 1, so that each time this this for loop iterates once, index will be incremented, and then instead of being 1 on the previous iteration, we're going to move to 2 and then 3 and then 4. So on the first iteration, nums, wow, I think I lost my mouse here. It's not right. So if in the first iteration, nums of I is equal to nums times index. Index starts from 1, so nums is 7. 7 times 1 is 7, and then index is incremented. Next iteration, nums of I, which is, of course, at that point, nums of 1, which is referencing the second element in the array, referenced by the first index. That would store nums dot index, nums times index, and that would just be 7 times 2, which would then be 14. So printing this out now, you see that we have sort of what we wanted before, and we can actually just take this here, and well, let's go ahead and return the array in question, and then we'll just take this and copy it and move over to Edabit here. Go to code,